Welcome to Leadership Beyond Burnout. I'm Dr. Kimberly Wilson, and tonight we have with us Dr. Lee Cordell with the Trauma Institute, and let's introduce her. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Dr. Lee. Please, I can't wait to hear about all the ways that your institute is changing the way leaders interact in their spaces and create psychological safety.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Okay. So, how did you get to this point where you decided, hey, we need to have psychological safety in our workspaces in order to grow as leaders?
Oh, that's such a great question. And, I think for a lot of us, as we follow, you look back and you're like, that was a very twisty, windy path, right?
Right.
And I think for me, I spent the vast majority of my life ending up in leadership positions and also kind of rubbing people the wrong way sometimes, right? Um,
Quit telling my story.
I'm a questioner. I want to understand why we're doing things the way that we're doing things. And I've been a questioner since I was a little kid. And that was something that in some spaces was really appreciated and in other spaces was really not appreciated.
Right.
And one thing that I realized I started doing as I, went through my journey through becoming a nurse and then becoming a nurse practitioner and all the jobs and all the school and, taking on more leadership positions throughout my time, I really started masking and I started kind of changing who I was to fit the mold of what they quote unquote wanted me to be.
Right.
And
it's stated, right? It's never stated exactly.
no,
But
it
you
was,
know.
yeah, it was, hey, you can't do that after I did it. And I say, okay, can you explain to me why? Well, that's just not the way we do things.
Mhm.
And I started really having a lot of cognitive dissonance because I was teaching students and precepting students and working at these institutions that were talking about innovation and talking about doing things in a new and evidence-based way and all these things. And then when it would actually come to like trying to implement some of these things, there was a lot of resistance.
Mm.
And
People don't like change, do they?
no. And that is something that, if anyone's ever seen the curve of how humans change, right? I'm a relatively early adopter as long as I understand why we're doing it. I know that there's, that some people are slower. And this was like kept coming up against systemic barriers. And that was frustrating. And I kept thinking, okay, well, that's fine. I'm going to just keep changing myself.
Wow.
And then one day, if I keep, and I don't know that this was a conscious thought, but it was like, if I just keep shifting to become exactly the right kind of leader, then the doors will unlock. I'll be allowed to innovate. I'll be allowed to do these things. And that day never
Paying
came.
your dues, right?
Right. That day never came. And, in mid 2020, right smack dab in the pandemic, I worked in bone marrow transplant and inpatient. And, we had enacted these rules for our patients that were done from a protective standpoint and really did not make sense for some of our patients.
Okay.
And so I found myself in this situation where one night I finally just looked at the nurse manager and I said, this is what we're going to do tonight, because I work night shift. I said, this is what we're going to do tonight. And if I get in trouble for it in the morning, so be it.
Right.
And then I came home to my husband, I looked at him and I was like, we have reached the point where I can no longer mask, right? we have reached the point where I'm going to get in trouble, and not because I've done the wrong thing, but because I've done the thing that the system is saying isn't what they want me to do.
Right.
And I had already been an entrepreneur for a hot minute at that point. I was doing coaching on the side. And so I saw what it was like to get to lead myself and to feel really safe making choices that felt right for me and showing up as my full self.
Mm.
And so that was really when I said, you know what, I got to do this for me. And so I actually left the bedside. I left teaching and the bedside and went out on my own, sole income as an entrepreneur, family of 5. And
Wow.
then realized, oh, wow, I feel so much better outside of here. And I want to, now that I'm feeling better and I'm feeling more empowered, I want to turn around and go back and help, but from the outside.
Right. Not from the inside. So while you were in the midst of that, admired in that experience, did you experience burnout at all? Or
Oh, yeah.
was there more burnout through your business?
Oh, my business, the burnout has never been through the business. You know, I now working 80-hour weeks together, that's going to burn most people out, because I was working 40 to 60 hours in the hospital or in the college, and then I was working like 20 to 40 in my business. So,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
80 hours a week. And so that was exhausting. But I think the big piece for me was the burnout really hit during the pandemic, because I was walking into the hospital every week and not knowing what was going to be different. I worked every
Right.
weekend. So every weekend I'd walk in and the policies would have changed. The rules would have changed. The things were always changing. And that was really exhausting. And there were a couple other things happening. We had lost a lot of really great staff,
Mm.
and they had been replaced with travelers, which these nurses and these humans had much less experience, and were getting paid up to twice as much as the nurses who worked for the institution. And so there was a
Who
lot
had to
of
train and teach them?
yes, exactly. So there was a lot of just frustration, resentment, uncertainty, and
Definitely sounds like burnout.
it really started taking a toll on my mental capacity. And I noticed that I think a lot of us make ourselves wrong when we stop caring as much, or we get less emotional, or we're more jaded.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I talk a lot about with the caring professionals who come through our institute is that's not a you problem. That's a system problem.
Right.
If you are getting to the point that this career you were so excited about, like you don't even really want to go to work or do the things anymore, you don't really care, that shows us that you're not being taken care of.
Correct. But the system people forget that the system is designed to perpetuate the system, to be self-sustaining. And so anything that feels like a threat has to be squashed, even if it's improvement.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that, because systems themselves are amoral, right? Like they're not good or bad. They're just set up.
They're set up to survive.
Yeah, set up to survive. And if I come in and I try to change a system that someone else believes is benefiting them, that is a threat to their safety. And whether they feel it that way or they actually acknowledge it that way. And so we used to get really frustrated with the system. And instead I was like, you know, y'all, maybe this isn't the right way for us to be looking at this. And I also knew that I didn't have clear perspective while I was in the system.
Right.
My sister is also a phenomenal human. She works with us at the Institute. She's also a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner. And she said something to me one day. She's always dropping quotes. And she said, Lee, sometimes you have to leave a system to heal a system, to repair a system.
Mm.
And I was like, oh. She was like, you need to leave the system. You need to leave the system to heal yourself, to then repair the system. And that was so permission giving of like, sometimes you need to walk out and get better and get some perspective, and then decide what you want to do next.
Right. But what fights against that, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, is this, Western culture sense of, you just got to keep trying. You're going to persevere and we blame ourselves when we can't make a toxic workplace culture beneficial, which
And
is crazy.
that's the system, right?
Mhm.
The system paints systemic problems as personal problems. Because if you think it's a personal problem, you're not going to look at the system and go, wait, it's actually a bigger, it's not me.
Right. So, and I know I'm shifting a little bit, but you got a question. You put a question inside me. So when you talk, I thought that was so profound when you talked about leaving the system to heal the system. But what
Yeah.
is it like for a leader who
Yeah.
doesn't feel psychologically safe and traumatized to be able to operate and lead people and protect and nurture and grow? What is the impact
Mm.
on them?
So I see one of two things happen. I
Mhm.
see leaders, and I think we get to preface it with this because a lot of times we think of CEOs and execs and other leaders as we so often paint them as like money hungry, callous,
Mhm.
uncaring, they're at the top, they don't care about the people. And I've spent a lot of time in C-suites and talking to execs, talking to people who lead business owners. They usually really deeply care.
Mhm.
And they get kind of in a same position that I was in where they are like, I would love to do something different here. And that innovation and that desire for change gets squashed in some ways. And so they do one of two things. They either turn off their feelings
Right.
and say, well, I'm just going to show up and do my job, get a paycheck, go home,
Mhm.
take all the money I can because why not?
Right.
Or they, uh, what I would call implode.
Mm.
And we've seen this. We've seen leaders implode or explode
Mhm.
where the pressure gets to be too much, the burnout gets to be too much, and all of a sudden you have a PR story of somebody losing their you know what
Mhm.
publicly because the pressure got to be too much.
Right. And then they look like the crazy one.
They look like the crazy one. They look like, and then people go, "Oh, look, see another person." And those are trauma responses. Those are
Mhm.
responses to I'm feeling profoundly unsafe. I don't feel like I can show up as my full self. And a lot of how we taught leadership in our country, I'm going to speak to the United States in particular, we taught people to not be vulnerable. We taught people to shut their feelings down. We taught people to come in the suit and the power suit and the shoulder pads and show up and do your job and like don't take anything from anyone
Right.
and turn off your feelings.
Right. And I know especially for me and other former military people, that was an absolute imperative. And
Yes.
sometimes it was leadership by yelling, um, as well as the shift from that type of leadership to civilian leadership. I know I couldn't understand why when I said something, people didn't.
Right? You're like, why are you
Like,
where's the yes ma'am, no ma'am?
where's the sense of urgency and why isn't it done already?
Yes.
They shut
Yes.
off. Mhm.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. And that brings a really great point into is it depends where you learn leadership, because if you're learning it in these very strict environments where this is exactly how you show up, um there's some corners of capitalism where you work 16-hour days, and if you work a
Or what's
15-hour
wrong with
day,
you?
or what's wrong with you, right? You're on the meeting at 2 a.m. or where are you at? uh and we're asked to turn off our humanity in that way of,
Mhm.
while you are working, you are a worker first and a human and a mom or a wife or like you're that person second.
Right.
And I would love to be able to do that. I would love to be
Mhm.
able to just be at work and turn off everything else around me, and I can't. That's not how we work.
No, no, no. Life always bleeds into your tasks and things that you have going on. So what are some of the things that you did other than leave
Yeah.
to kind of soothe some of that burnout? Did
Yeah.
you have any go-to strategies, or you were just letting it run amok?
I I slept a lot. And I think that was something I felt really guilty for. I was like, why can't I get out of bed? Like, why am I so tired? I was working 80-hour weeks. Now I'm working 30-hour weeks. Why am I so exhausted?
Right.
And when I learned about actually what happens inside of our bodies and our nervous systems, our immune systems, when we leave that, what we call hyper aroused state, where you are running in fight or flight constantly, and maybe you're also hypo
Exactly.
aroused too, and that's you're frozen, and so you're just uh like ping ponging back and forth.
Right.
When you leave those states and actually get into a place where your nervous system's able to like calm down,
Hmm.
your body goes, oh my gosh, we're so tired, like
Hmm.
to our bones tired.
Right.
And so I slept a lot. I really started prioritizing. Here's what I'll say. I started treating myself like a toddler. Right? If I was tired, I took a nap. If I was hungry, I ate. If I was thirsty, I drank water. If I, was having some emotions, I let myself feel them. And
So
that
you mothered
I
yourself.
did. I reparented myself. Absolutely. And that was it was really hard. It was really hard because that hustle, drive, high achiever, like it kept
Right.
wanting to kick back in. And I had to say, no, 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 we're
Right.
not going back there. We're not doing that.
Mhm. And it's so hard to unlearn when everything around you, every person, every society, the society tells you you need to be the Energizer Bunny,
Mhm.
nonstop, nonstop energy, nonstop drive. Always need to be achieving. No time, and rest loses its importance.
Yes. There's I'm going to forget this human's name. But invitation to go look it up. But there's a quote that talks about rest is a rebellious act.
Oh, I love that.
And when you think about this, I'm multiracial. My dad is Black, and I look at ancestrally what his family went through. My mom's side, farmers, very poor, same thing. If they stopped and rest on one side, there's the potential for harm, abuse.
Right.
On the other side, there's potential for we don't eat. And so,
Wow.
generationally, something that was so fascinating for me to learn along my trauma certification was how our trauma gets passed down genetically,
Hmm.
not just through the stories and through the experiences of the people, but also physically in our bodies.
Absolutely.
And so rest for a lot of us still feels somewhat dangerous. There's
Hmm.
this innate questioning of, can we stop? Can we sit down?
Right.
Are we going to be okay?
Right.
So yeah.
Man, that is so powerful and so unconscious. So people are just not aware of that somatic experience of trauma, and how, and that it didn't start. You're trying to figure out, why am I like this? Why am I feeling guilty? And it was years ago,
Yeah.
generations ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they say, look, you can look up to 6 generations back and 6 generations forward. And that if trauma happened that far back, or you experience a trauma now, it will potentially impact that far forward.
Wow.
And that's and when you go 6 generations back, we're talking hundreds of ancestors.
Yes, absolutely. And for many of us, not even on this continent.
Right. Not on this continent. Most of us,
Hmm.
not on this continent.
Right. Wow. So that was, you rest is your rebellious act that you continue to do, even in your business, even in your institute.
Yes. Yes. We we had a meeting today. So we've had some really rapid growth in our organization, which is phenomenal. And the amount of humans now in our DMs joining our group, in the email inbox, and we have 8 team members. And so we were having our monthly meeting today, and something that I think is really important for me as a leader, because all of these humans in front of me have experienced burnout. That's why they are now running their own businesses. Right. I said, here's the thing. We really we get to tighten up our boundaries around our on time and our off time. If you are finding yourself working beyond your hours, let me know, and let's have a conversation around, do you want more hours, or do we need to hire someone else? Do we need to shift your responsibilities in your role? Do we need to shift how you're fulfilling that role? Because this isn't something where I said, and I joke with them, and they know this is a joke. I'm like, the only way I get mad is if you come to me after you're not okay.
So you want the opportunity to not let them spiral down.
Yeah. And I joke, I'm like, even if you're not okay and you come, you're going to be met with psychological safety, because if we didn't do that, what kind of organization will we be? Right. But I think it really, it's a big shift for a lot of people when they come onto our team to realize that we practice what we preach. We walk our talk. And so if we're out here telling people that they need to make sure that their needs are being met and that they need to prioritize their humanness over their work, then that also needs to be happening in the background of our work.
So what happens? See, I'm me formulating.
I know. I'm like,
where am I going? What happens for the leader or just regular human in their workspaces, and they can't control or they can't ask for those things because it might mean their job? How do they get psychological safety?
So we teach what we call trauma-informed self-care to a lot of professionals. And there's 3 pieces to this, because you can't always control what the system is handing to you. And while we do want to ensure that we're not putting it all on the individual's shoulders, we also want to make sure that individuals feel empowered to take steps that they can right now so that they can feel better. So there's 3 things we talk about. And actually we talk about reparenting, which we were just talking about. So we say there's 3 pieces to reparenting.
Okay.
You've got nurturing, and nurturing is everything we just talked about. Treat yourself like a toddler. Ask yourself what you need and give it to yourself, or ask for help getting it. And that sounds so simple, but that is it's so different.
It's revolutionary.
It is. It really is revolutionary. It's the amount of humans who come into our space who, when I say, what do you need, say, I don't know how to know that. How do I know what I need?
Right.
So one of our favorite exercises there is I say, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to wake up and you're going to ask yourself, what do I want to wear today? What would feel good to wear? You're going to go down to the kitchen. You're going to say, what does my body need to feel nourished? And do I need this or this? You're going to start asking yourself questions and feeling the answers that your body and your brain give you, and start being curious about that. Because you're going to start
being on autopilot.
Exactly. Instead of just guzzling the 4 cups of coffee, like between each one, is this going to serve me? And so that actually leads us into the second piece, which is guidance. So a lot of us were not given good guidance when we were younger. We were either given guidance that caused us to mask because we weren't psychologically safe in our homes. We weren't able to be our full selves. Our caregivers told us to shift or change. Or we weren't given guidance at all.
Right.
The amount of humans who didn't know anything about finances.
Yeah. Right. Right. And I'm definitely in the generation that was supposed to be seen and not heard.
Yes. Yes. So it's hard to get guidance when you're not allowed to ask questions.
Right.
And so guidance can come from a trusted mentor. It can come from somebody who loves you and knows you. Or one of my favorite places guidance can come from is your future self.
Mm.
So something I do often before I'm going to make a decision is I say, what would my future self tomorrow morning want me to do here? 6 months from now, want me to do here? So, you're tired, you're sitting on the couch, there's dishes in the sink. Would my future self want me to do the dishes tonight so that she wakes up to a clean kitchen? Or would she want me to go to bed and get some extra sleep and do them in the morning?
Right.
So you can actually ask that version of yourself for what they'd want. And it's so fascinating how much better your life gets when you ask her or them, because it feels good when you get there.
Right. And you don't get trapped into the emotional aspect of it when you're exhausted, worn out, and drained, and you're resentful about everything that's going on and around you, and you're just like, let me just get it done.
Yeah. And then you're resentful the next morning when you walk downstairs and see the sink and you're like, why am I like this?
Yeah.
And then the third piece is boundaries and discipline, limits, all those things that we kind of think about as the negative aspects of parenting, but those are so important for us. And again, a lot of us had too strict boundaries or discipline or limits placed on us, and some of us didn't have boundaries or limits or discipline at all. And so this is, what do I need and how am I going to do what I say I'm going to do?
Okay. All right. And hold that thought just for a moment. We're going to pause for a brief commercial.
Hey everyone, this is Araya McGarry. I'm the host of Get Celebritized with Araya McGarry, right here Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Limelight Network, right here on E360 TV.
Okay, and welcome back. So please continue where you left off.
Yeah.
About boundaries and limits.
Yeah. So boundaries are one of those places where a lot of people think they're setting boundaries and they're not. They're either, a lot of times when we think we're setting boundaries, we're actually setting what we call barriers. So we're saying you can't do X or stop acting like Y.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that's a barrier is because we are creating disconnection through control. So we're trying to control somebody else's actions so that we get what we need.
Right. Right. And I can say that clinically, that is very frustrating.
Yes.
When people come and they bring in somebody else who is not in the session. We're just talking about how can we change them to be who we need them to be.
Yes. Yes.
No.
Yes. I thank you for that example because yes, I see it all the time. I'll have people come to, well, my so-and-so is a narcissist or so-and-so is this. And how do I get them to stop acting that way? And I say, okay, great. So instead of trying to change their behavior, what we're going to do is we're going to teach you how to set boundaries so that your behavior gets to be in alignment with how you want to show up, regardless of what they do.
Right.
So a boundary in the workplace looks like I will turn off my computer at 10 p.m. Mm-hmm. If you need me after 10 p.m., I will not be available. So if you send me an email after 10 p.m., I will respond to it the following morning at 7 a.m.
So are you saying that if they do that, the world will not collapse and
right? You can actually be off your email for 8 hours. Yes. Yes. And so many people say, oh my gosh, my boss isn't going to tolerate that. Well, okay. Couple options. One, can we have a conversation with your boss about why that feels so unsafe for them?
Right.
Number two, do we want to work in a place where when we set a boundary around being off of our email for a whopping 8 hours, that's not allowed?
Right.
And sometimes that doesn't work. If I, as an employee, said, well, I'm going to turn off my pager, and even when I'm out on call, if you try to get a hold of me, I'm not going to answer it. That's a boundary. Your boss is also able to go, that boundary does not work per what you were hired to do.
Right.
So people can do whatever they want in response to your boundary. That's what it is. You're saying, this is how it feels good for me to be connected to you. And if not, this is how I'm going to disconnect. But it's all about your behavior. And we get to own that other people get to respond however they want.
Right. Right.
Not our
And
job.
sometimes there are consequences, but
Yes.
that's okay.
Yes.
If it shifts you into a different reality where your boundaries are going to be respected.
Yes.
I also like, and I want to add to that, one of the
Please.
things that I do sometimes when I really need space is I have an Android. I don't know if iPhones do this, but I'm able to set my text messages so that this one in particular says, "Hey, I'm enjoying family time right now. I will return your text message tomorrow."
I love that.
So I don't even see it.
Yes. And that's it, is also, can I be disciplined enough to not go in my email?
Yes.
Because if we're going to set a boundary, it's our job to hold it. So I'm not only going to respond the way I've told this person I'm going to, but also I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do.
Right.
And this is hard. This is really hard, especially with how connected we are today. That I will be honest, it's a place I really struggle. And what I've realized is that this is the limits piece that comes in. I have so much more capacity when I limit how much time I spend in those spaces of social media and email and those things. And so for me, putting that limit on to other people, they might think, oh, well, you might miss out on clients, or you might miss out on this or that. Yes, I might. And I worked in critical care and cancer for over a decade.
Right.
I know what true emergencies look like. I have been in many of them. Nothing in my business is an emergency.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite things. Is anybody going to die?
Right. Right. I mean,
because you don't get on TikTok?
Yeah. I know it. And just witnessing and validating anyone who has that feeling in their body of, it does feel really hard to disconnect or unplug from the devices. It does feel really hard to set that boundary and hold it. We have a lot of people who identify as people pleasers come into our spaces, and they are burned out because they're always saying yes to everyone else, and them learning how to set boundaries. They're like, I literally feel like I'm going to die when I set a boundary. And I'm like, yeah, that's how you're supposed to feel because you're not used to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know when I set, for myself, the boundary was I did about a 5-month social media detox, and I just did not post anything.
Wow.
And I thought it was going to be scary, but I thought about it, and I was just like, I need a rest, and I don't want to do this anymore. It doesn't feel good. And so now I'm slowly walking back into it, but I feel so much better. I feel so much more purposeful after doing that little social media detox.
Yeah. There's a book called Stolen Focus that apparently I'm having trouble with names today, but it's, if you go look for it, you'll find it very easily.
Okay.
And it's all about how our capacity for focusing on things and being intentional and present in the moment has decreased so much over the last 100 years.
Yes.
Due to a lot of systemic influences. And I actually went to my team after I listened to the audiobook as I was driving to and from meeting a client in Tennessee. I'm in Ohio. And I got back and I said, I went to my team. I said, I will pay anybody $50 who listens to this. And they were like, what? And I was like, I'm serious. They're like, Lee, we listened to it anyway. I'm like, no, I want to reward you for listening to it because it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the concept of, yes, I get to be individually responsible for my focus and for my capacity and for my burnout symptoms. And I do not need to take credit for what the system is intentionally doing to make it easier for me to burn out, because all of these things, social media, the news, all of these things
Games on your phone
are trying to steal your focus. They are
Mhm.
trying to take up your capacity. They are trying to make it easier for you to get hooked on them. And that is such a big cause of burnout.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think there was a Black Mirror episode about some social media thing, and the CEO said something about this changed so much. It was, I just wanted it to be fun, and I have whole departments that just focus on taking your attention, time, and
Yeah.
attention. And
Yeah.
like that is so very true.
Yeah. So it's again, it comes back to that rebellious revolutionary piece of I'm going to reclaim my time. And
Wow.
when I'm at work, that is time that is spent on work. And when I'm not at work, that's my time. And
Right.
for me, one of the best things of running a business and being a leader in my own space is my team has their kids show up on calls. Today I was on a call with like 20 clients and my kid popped in to ask to get a popsicle and he waved hi to everybody and then he left. And we have barking dogs and ringing doorbells and hey, hold on a second, I gotta go. And that is all normalized. And that's such a huge
Right.
psychological safety piece for our clients and our participants who come in, because when they see us model that, they're like, oh, wait, we can take a call from bed. We can show up with like wet hair and no makeup. We can have our baby on our lap.
Right.
Yes, please bring your whole self.
Yes. I love that. I love that. Wow. Bring your whole self to work, and you don't have to apologize for having a life.
No.
And let's pause one more time for a commercial break.
What's up? It's Brian Randolph, host of Keeping It Real with Randy Boy. You can catch me every Saturday morning at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time on Vitality TV, right here on E360 TV. Check me out, Randy Boy.
I love that. You remind me of a dear friend who has a marketing company. It's Social for Good, and they do exactly the same thing. That dogs, kids, whatever, just life can happen, and it's not a big deal. And I just love. I think the pandemic really gave us permission to be human. As many of the bad things that happened, I feel like it gave us permission to be human. And wasn't there even an anchor that had that happen? Like kids in the
Yes,
back?
yes. His wife, comes like rushing in and grabs the kid, and there's another kid, and yes, and that was such a moment because every parent
No.
on the planet was like, I know what that's like when you're like pushing the kid out of and you're like, absolutely, stop it, right? Like, and this is something that I actually think I'm so glad we're talking about this because our kids want to know that they are the most important things to us and that they belong in their spaces. And so when we model a kid coming in and us pausing with a client and turning to our child and saying, do you need something right now? Is it an emergency? Are you good? Okay. And coming back, what that tells our children is this work is not more important than you.
Right.
And that is so huge for so many kids because so many kids grow up feeling like work is more important than them. And as a parent who has to work, there's these things called bills and food. And as somebody who, needs money, I totally understand, we as parents need to do that. And if there's ways for us post-pandemic in this Zoom virtual world to help our kids feel more included and more important and like they belong, like they're not a problem, like they don't need to be seen and not heard, or not seen or heard, that is going to change how they grow up and lead.
Right, right. And I know I have definitely been guilty, not so much with work because I've been in front of this laptop for quite some time and it just is what it is now. So my clients kind of know it's gonna
Yeah.
happen. But when the downtime, when you are in an industry where you are focused on people, and sometimes I need those moments where I'm just like just absorbed in what I'm doing and just turn everything off. And my 18-year-old said to me, like, Mommy, when you're done with work and I want to talk to you, I need you not to be irritable and just
Mm.
listen to me. And I was like,
I know
You're right. You're right. I'm sorry. And it was such a beautiful reality check. And I absolutely loved the
Mm.
fact that she felt safe enough to check me.
that because a lot of people would look at that and go, "Oh my gosh, I'm a horrible parent," right?
Mhm.
No, if your kid is coming to you and feels safe expressing a need, you're doing great
Mhm.
because that's what we want. We cannot possibly meet all of our kids' needs without them ever asking. We want them to learn how to say, "This is what
Right.
I need," because so many of us didn't, like I said before. And
Absolutely.
one of the things that so my twins will actually be 11 tomorrow, and my oldest is 13. And one of the things we taught them when they were younger is if we were talking to an adult and they had something to say that was not an emergency, to come up and put their hand on our hand. And then what we would do is take our other hand and put it on top of their hand. And what that told them was, I see you. I know you need me. As soon as this is done, I'm going to turn to you. And then we had to actually practice it. And I'm going to tear up. The other day, my husband was talking to somebody out in public, and my 11-year-old son, I haven't seen them do it in a while. And my 11-year-old son came up and and then stopped and grabbed my husband's hand and put his hand on top of my husband's hand. And my husband put his hand on top of my son's hand. And I'm just watching this and I'm like, oh my gosh, but it was such a beautiful way of acknowledging you matter to me and I see you. And also, this is important too. And I'm going to finish it. And then you're going to get all of my attention.
That is beautiful. Oh, I wish I had that.
Right. And I think we can bring that into work too. I think as leaders, we can start to bring that in because I think so many times the people we're leading don't come to us and tell us what they need because they think we're really busy.
Right.
Or they're going to bother us or they're going to interrupt. And they've been taught to not interrupt. And so that's something that, and my clients have this a lot. They're like, well, I didn't message you because it was 10 o'clock and I didn't want to. I said, I already have my boundaries. My phone's on do not disturb. You can message me at any time. And the moment I'm back in, I will respond to you.
And I just love the fact that you mentioned how we've been socialized not to interrupt and I was just thinking about how that impacts women in leadership when their voices are stolen, not only for psychological safety, but for basic needs of, for growth and ideas and getting promotions. We don't interrupt, be nice, don't be rude.
Yeah. Yes. And that is something that I think we can start asking of, hey, going to our fellow leaders or people who are leading us and saying, hey, when I want to talk to you, when I have an idea or when I need something, what is the best way for me to share that with you?
Yeah.
So I worked with over 25 physicians, and every night I didn't know who was going to be on, who I was going to need to call. And you're calling them in the middle of the night.
Right.
And so every time, if I had not worked with that person before, I would, at the beginning of the shift, I would call them. I'd say, hey, I'm Lee. And what do you want to be notified about tonight? And do you want a page or do you want a phone call? And it was phenomenal to me. Every single person wanted something different.
Right.
And our relationships became so close because they knew that I was going to do what I said I was going to do. So if they wanted me to page them about a specific thing, I was going to do that. If they wanted me to call them, if they were like, I trust you, after a while, a lot of times they're like, you've got it. Call me if you need me. It's fine. And I knew that they didn't know me. And so establishing that trust as well of it can just be so, it can make such a difference in the relationships in
Right.
both directions.
Right.
Whether you're leading or you're being led.
Right. And one of the things that and one of the things that I learned is also really critical in leadership roles or not is not just what to notify people about, but how
Wow.
you want that information. So for me, don't give me every detail.
Mhm.
Please don't, because I am gone on to the next 50th thing. I would stop listening to you. Give me the facts, and if I need more detail, I will ask, and you'll have a much more engaged version of me if you just do that. Now, other people, they need all the details, and so it's important. So when I interact with someone like that, I have to know that I can't get frustrated
Mhm.
with them asking questions, because that's what they need in order to feel whole and satisfied.
Yes.
And vice versa. They're going to have to know, you're going to have to ask me a couple of questions, because I'm going to give you
Right.
just the basics.
And can we both honor what we both need? Right.
Right.
We say safe. Well, actually, my shirt says it. I think it's backwards, but it says safer, supportive, mutually beneficial. That's what we talk about when it comes to leadership and relationships. We want our relationships and how we lead to feel safer for people. We want it to feel more supportive, and it should be mutually beneficial. When I lead you, we both come out of that situation better.
Right. Right. Not, I need to dominate you in order to feel like I've done my job or done my role.
Yeah. And I, wrapping it up with that system piece, mutually beneficial is actually one of the easiest things that we can bring into systems.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my favorite things to help people see when we go into organizations or we go into businesses and they're like, well, we can't, like, someone has to win. And we're like, actually, there are ways for you to both win. So are you willing to like play the curiosity game with us? Like, you willing to go on a ride with us for just a little bit? Because I know that your brain is like, there's no way.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so cool is some of the solutions that come out of that. They're like, oh my gosh, we would have never thought about that. And this is even better than it. And I say, I know. And
I've seen this happen.
Right? Like, yeah, from Frozen. Yeah. That is, but it's also like one of my favorite things, because that's us creating mutually beneficial relationships between our organization and this organization, because they're getting what they are just getting so much goodness out of what we're bringing. And then we are really excited to bring it, and it feels good for everyone. And so that, I think as leaders, that is a really cool standard to start looking at implementing, is how does everyone win?
Right. And just bringing that home with, we're talking about, leadership beyond burnout. That's such a big piece of burnout, is feeling like there's no efficacy. You don't have any ability to control the outcomes or get the support you need. And that mutually beneficial situation allows you to get that, so that you don't even get to that place of burnout. I love it.
Yeah. If everyone's needs are being met, no one's burning out.
Right. Right. Oh, I could stay here for hours and talk to you. I just want to Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. You have been a wealth of information and insight and just giving. I thought I was going to have to leave the burnout tips on for the whole episode. You just dropped so many beautiful gems, and I just love everything that you're doing in the Institute. Now, you want to say something real quick about what's been going across the banner here, what that is?
Sure. So back earlier in the episode, we talked about those implosion and explosion moments of where the feelings become too feelingy and you lose it or you go in. I think that that's something that a lot of us have throughout the day. We have these moments of tension or where we feel unsafe. And the 10-second protocol is a tool that we use at the Institute. We teach to people that helps you in those moments of tension, of feeling like you're having emotions that are too hot to handle. It helps you get back to a regulated, calm state. And it is something you can do in a board meeting. You can do it in your car. You can do it literally anywhere. And so this is a 5-minute video of me explaining it and walking you through it. And I hope that it helps. We've had people teach this to their kiddos. My son uses this when he pitches. He's a pitcher in baseball.
Okay.
And his coaches are like, what is he doing? And I'm like, have him teach you.
That is so good.
Yeah, it's a great, anyone, I should say practically anyone can use it. So.
And that's so beautiful. But I'm so weird. As you're saying it, I'm thinking of Dr. Seuss. We can do it on the plane. We can do it on the train. We can do it here. We can do it there. We can do it anywhere.
I've been in the kitchen before, and my kids come in and they're like, "Are you doing a 10?" I'm like, "Yes." They're like, "Okay, bye." like they know. They're like, "Mommy's calming down."
Beautiful.
And
beautiful.
yeah, it's science backed and quick and easy.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. And we can't wait to hear more from you. And we'll have all your contact information below. Thank you once again for showing up for us.
Thank you for having me. I deeply appreciate it.
You're welcome. See you next time. Thank you, everybody. And this ends our edition of Leadership Beyond Burnout. We'll see you next Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.